Is it gonna be here?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, she emailed us like that. Yeah, we'd have the stickers and stuff, so that's cool. Yeah.
Question for Sarah and Brooklyn. I guess since you're friends with Levi and you're roommates with Brooklyn, you know how we changed the profile pic?
Yeah.
I asked him and he was like, "We're not a thing." I'm like,
I think we're gonna get started. Is everyone here? You guys?
Yeah, is everyone here?
Okay, we can wait a minute.
We should just get started because we've got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we don't want to keep
Devin
you
is
guys
literally
over
just
because it's
snapping
gonna
me.
be kind of close
where are
on
you at
time.
for?
Okay. So, today, Maria maybe told you about what we're doing today, but we're talking about health at every size and kind of that healthy relationship with food and how that will relate into your future dietetic practice. But also, I think a lot of us can relate to the topics that we're going to talk about today because we are always surrounded by nutrition information. I mean, this is what we have gone to school for, and so me and Taylor have felt that we have some of these feelings as well and have had some of these maybe not as healthy relationship with food or exercise because it is what we're surrounded by every day. So we're going to talk about it in kind of like both realms, so maybe in your future dietetics practice and also just for your own knowledge as well.
And so this presentation was developed by 3 organizations. So it was developed by the Society for Nutrition Education and Behavior, the National Association for the Advancement of Fat Acceptance, and the Association for Size Diversity and Health. And so throughout this presentation today, we'll be referring to health at every size with the acronym Haes. So that's what we mean by when we say Haes.
So first of all, who we are, some of you might have seen us before in like SDA meetings and stuff. My name is Carly, and I'm a dietetic intern, and I got my Bachelor's of Science from Oregon State University. And my future goals include to just continue practicing this health at every size mentality and intuitive eating with future patients and clients. My final rotation, which we will start in like week and a half, I'll be going back to Oregon and working with a dietitian that does that in her practice. So I'm really, really excited.
So I'm Taylor. I went to Virginia Tech. So I did something called a BSMS program. So I did a 5-year program where the last year was a master's program. And my future goal in dietetics is to work with eating disorders and just help people develop a healthy relationship with food and exercise by using a health at every size approach and also intuitive eating. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so what is health at every size? So raise your hand if you've ever heard of this term before. Okay.
Wow, this is
Yeah.
good.
So actually we were not exposed to this in our undergrad either, so this is one reason why we were really interested in coming today to talk to you guys. So I'm glad we did. So health at every size, it basically supports people in adapting health behaviors that do not focus on weight. So Haes kind of encourages 3 different principles or encompasses. One is kind of more intuitive eating, and intuitive eating is kind of a principle that's incorporated into health at every size that we'll talk about a little bit more. But this way of eating encourages people to eat in a flexible manner. It also values their pleasure, their satiety, and their hunger and fullness cues. And then we're also going to be talking today about intuitive exercise or finding joy in movement. So mostly those top 2, but then Haes also incorporates just accepting and respecting our natural body size. Okay, so just an outline of what we're going to be talking about today. So first, Carly's going to talk about something called black and white thinking, why having like a good food, bad food mentality can be harmful to our minds and our bodies and our relationship with food. Next, we'll talk about our internal and external cues, so our hunger and fullness cues, and dive a little bit more into that, talking about why it's important to plan for eating, talking a little bit about food cravings, mindful eating, emotional eating, and then we'll and a little bit with intuitive exercise.
Okay, so first of all, black and white thinking. Can anyone guess what this kind of means? Yeah?
Maybe like putting food in a good and bad groups.
Yep, yeah. And you'll see this, if you haven't already, all the time. On social media, especially. But just like in everyday counseling patients, you're always going to hear people say, well, I ate this and this was bad, or I ate this and this was good. Here are some like statements that are kind of that black and white thinking. And so chips in our society, they're good, or they're bad. Chips are bad. They're not really, but chips are bad, and carrots are good. That's that black and white thinking. And we tend to label foods, and we're all guilty of it sometimes. And this can be emotionally exhausting. And today we're going to really talk about that emotional experience with food and how this nutrition and food and exercise can be really emotional and take a toll on our mental health as well. And when we talk about Haes, we're talking about like our overall health. You can eat salads every day of your life, but if you're obsessive over it, it's really damaging for your mental health as well, and so you're not overall healthy. And so raise your hand if you've ever had these thoughts of, I'm eating this and this is good or bad. Yep, we all have had these thoughts. And just a disclaimer, we're going to be saying you a lot in this presentation. This might apply to you, it might not. But again, thinking of your future practice in dietetics as well. Okay, so we want to strive to be more gray with our thinking, and gray with how we talk to patients and clients. So what does this look like? And here are some more statements about what gray thinking or gray statements might look like. So thinking about what you really want. So if you're craving or you want something crunchy and salty, maybe having some carrots and some chips, kind of that balance that we always talk about. And to be honest, I didn't really get exposed to Haes at all until very, very recently. And this is something that is very new to me as well. And it takes some time to get used to, but these statements are all a great example of balance. And we always talk about balance, but to be honest, until a couple months ago, I never really knew what that looked like in practice. I never knew what balance actually was. And so these are some statements to kind of talk about that balance and thinking more in that gray area. And so here again, a yo-yo. We've all heard about yo-yo dieting, right? Go up and down with our weight. That's not healthy. And then this food police versus food rebel. We don't want to be the food police. When we're dietitians, we don't want to say, don't eat this, but eat that. That's just not what we're going out to do. And it doesn't work. Research shows this kind of mentality, it just doesn't work. And when we restrict too much, or when we tell people to restrict, or when we tell ourselves to restrict, it ends up with the opposite effect. We can restrict for a while, but our bodies know what they need, and then eventually we're going to have that binging or food rebel behavior, and other people will have that as well. And this happens so much, even if it's not a full-blown eating disorder. And we're not always talking about eating disorders when we're talking about this. We're talking about disordered thoughts around food as well. And I've had disordered thoughts around food. A lot of dietitians, most dietitians, I would say, have had disordered thoughts around food. And so it's more of that trying to get the yo-yo in, or this pendulum in the middle. And we don't always stay in the middle, and that's okay too. We don't want to beat ourselves up for being more of a food police or more of a food rebel, but really trying to find that balance and giving ourselves the grace to be okay, if we kind of go more to this side, that's okay, but we really want to try. We're all human, we make mistakes, but being in the middle is really where we want to be.
Okay. So is a little slow. Okay, so thank you, Carly, for talking about black and white thinking. So now we're just going to talk a little bit more about our internal and external cues and how we can know when and how much to eat and how that can play an effect. Okay, so we are all born natural, intuitive eaters as a child. You know, we cry when we're hungry, when we were a baby, and maybe we turn our head when we're full. So, you know, we are born intuitive eaters, and that's something that's natural for us. And even into toddlerhood, we're still intuitive eaters. However, when our parents we grow up a little bit more, our parents might tell us to, you know, eat our broccoli first before we have our dessert, or eat our whole plate first before we can leave the table. And those things kind of mess up our hunger and fullness cues a little bit, and just how we know when to stop eating and when we're hungry. So it can be kind of difficult. Okay, so then as dietetic students, we're often taught about these external cues. So we're taught about calories, our grams of fat. Maybe we're talking about someone with diabetes and their, you know, exchange groups, if you guys have talked about that. We're taught a lot about portion sizes and my plate from the USDA. All of these things, which are fine and dandy. However, we often don't talk about our internal cues. So things like our hunger and fullness cues, our food cravings, you know, the pleasure and enjoyment that we actually get out of food. And so these external cues, you know, they're appropriate at some time, especially when someone's on tube feeding, they're on a ventilator, they're in very poor health, maybe they're food insecure. There's different things where, you know, these internal cues aren't really appropriate. However, for a normal, healthy person, for the most part, relying on our internal cues can be a much better indicator of how much and when we should be able to eat.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about how do we tune into those hunger and fullness cues. And I've never had experience counseling a patient on this specifically, so I'm not the expert in this. And to be honest, I have a hard time with it myself because it's not easy, because I grew up, I don't want to say we because we all have different experiences, but I grew up with a mom who always dieted and kind of saw that in my life and kind of realized quickly, without knowing it, that I felt like what you eat isn't really, like, you should eat some, like, you're not really in control kind of thing. In reality, you are in control, your body is in control, your whole body is in control, and so really kind of figuring that out is really hard. So your body gives you all these different cues when you're hungry. Your stomach might growl, you might get a little like brain fog, you might get a little sleepy. It's different for everybody, but we kind of usually get similar responses when we get hungry. And then when we feel really full, we know what that feels like as well, I think. I do, at least. And so what happens when you start eating a meal when you're starving? When you're like ravenously hungry, what do you think happens?
Eat way more than you normally would.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
Because then you'd like feel fuller longer.
Maybe, yeah. But oftentimes when we're really, really hungry, we just like scarf down food because we're super hungry and we're not listening to our bodies at all. We're just like, this is food, I need to eat it. And sometimes, you know, that's fine. We don't want to say one thing is worse than another, but to be able to listen to your body throughout the whole eating experience to really know when you should stop is really important. And so what happens when you eat a meal when you're gently hungry? Yeah, usually you might not eat as much. And that might be because you're listening more or you're just not ravenous kind of thing. So it's really important to use a scale like this, maybe when you're counseling patients or just thinking of it in your own mind when you're eating, like how hungry am I before I start eating? And if you're gently hungry, then kind of just keep listening to your body throughout the whole eating experience, and we're kind of going to talk about mindful eating a little bit. And that's kind of what that is, just being mindful throughout the whole process. So what keeps people from eating when they're hungry? This is a really important question. Yeah.
You're busy, like at practice or
Mhm.
something or something.
Yeah, you might be busy and you're not even, you might be really hungry, but you're not listening to that. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
It might be more of like an eating disorder thing. Like they don't want to, if they like think they already like ate a cookie or something that they shouldn't because they'll think they'll get fat or something.
Yeah, definitely. That can be there. Sometimes people will be like, well, I just ate. Why am I hungry? I shouldn't eat if I'm hungry. But they feel hungry kind of thing. So it's like this internal battle. What else? Yeah.
People might not have access to food.
Yeah. And like Taylor said, that's a hard situation, and this intuitive eating or health at every size doesn't always apply to that group of people. Yeah.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So if you just eat, but then you feel hungry, like that happens to me like on the daily. What do you do for that?
You eat.
You
So
do,
we
okay.
want to listen to our bodies, right? And because you feel hungry and your mind's saying, well, I just ate, like I shouldn't eat. That's your mind. That's all in your mind. And it's hard. It's hard to be like, this doesn't make any sense. But sometimes it doesn't. Maybe you're doing more studying that day, so you're using more energy. So maybe you do need another snack. And listening to those hunger cues is really important, and honoring those cues and eating a snack is really, really important. And I think a lot of people don't usually do that. And it might be also like the time of day. Like you're like, it's 10 p.m. Why am I hungry? I shouldn't eat after 7. Well, if you're hungry, you should eat. Because your body's obviously telling you that you're hungry. Why are we like shutting off those cues? Like who told us that that was a thing to do? So it's definitely a conversation that is a really important one to have with yourself or with your client. Yeah.
On the flip side, if you're not hungry, like some people aren't hungry for breakfast,
Mhm.
should they like not eat even though breakfast is really important?
Yeah, breakfasts are really, that's a good point. So breakfast we always hear is like sometimes the most important meal of the day. If you wake up and you're not hungry, forcing yourself to eat when you're not hungry, it goes the same way. So a lot of people, they take a while to like wake up, right? So they don't feel like eating right in the morning, or they feel nauseous right in the morning. So why would you there's this really good metaphor that I heard. If we broke our ankle or we twisted our ankle, we wouldn't like keep walking on our ankle, right? Because like that just seems crazy. But similarly, when we eat, when we are overly stuffed or we keep eating, why are we eating when we're overly full? Or if we're not hungry, why would we eat? It just that doesn't make sense in the same way that like walking on a broken ankle doesn't make sense. So listening to your body. If your ankle hurts, don't walk on it. If you're not hungry, you don't have to eat.
There's something else, if eating in the morning is the only time that you get to eat that day, then something called eating out of self-care, then maybe that would be an appropriate time. Or, you're not hungry, bring those snacks with you that we'll talk about later with you throughout the day. That's another option.
And these are all things you'll learn throughout your, different tips and tricks that you'll learn throughout your dietetic and nutrition experience of how to maybe counsel patients on what they should do if they're not hungry in the morning. But we know breakfast is a really good meal to eat.
Yes. Okay.
Good question.
So now we're going to kind of talk about that more. Planning for eating. Okay, so what do you do when hunger strikes and the fridge is empty? You don't have to answer this. So we're going to talk about the importance of always having, enough food around, a good variety of food to satisfy our cravings, variety of textures, and that kind of thing. Okay, so planning for eating. Just some things that you can ask yourself or you can ask your clients and patients. So things like, where will be the next time I get hungry? Where will I be? Will I be at school? Will I be at work? Maybe I'll be at home. What food will be available to me? Will I have access to a cafeteria, a dining hall, fast food, grocery store, or do I have to bring my own food, or can I afford to go out to eat? Do I need to bring something along with me? So these are some things, to help you tune more into those hunger cues, so that when hunger does strike, you have options available to you. Okay, and so planning for eating. So we want to figure out the best way to grocery shop. So maybe someone prefers going to the grocery store every day. Maybe they prefer to do that because their cravings change each day and they don't want to meal prep and have like the same kind of things every day. So they decide to go to the store every day and kind of really tune into those signals and decide, oh, today I'm feeling pizza, so I'm going to go out and make some pizza. Or maybe they don't have time to do that, so they go once a week, which most people do. Or maybe even once a month because, they only get paid once a month, and that's when they can do that. So in all these circumstances, we want to think about balance for meals and our snacks. So, we don't want the same food every day. Our bodies crave variety. We want crunchy, we want salty and sweet. And as nutrition students, we're taught about My Plate, we're taught about the 5 food groups. But when we're planning out a meal, we don't want to spend too much time doing that because in reality, nutrition is important, but it's not the end-all be-all. We have, relationships, friendships, we have all these other things going on in our lives that should take priority. Sometimes we tend to focus so much on nutrition that it gets kind of tiring and exhausting. So when we're helping our clients and helping ourselves, we just need to think about quick, simple, and tasty. Pick a few different food groups and just kind of move on.
So next we're going to talk about cravings. So has anyone felt that cravings have gotten such a bad rap? Like if you have cravings, like what's your problem kind of thing? I feel that way. And it's interesting because our body craves things. That's like what it's supposed to do. So it lets us know like what we want to eat and how we're supposed to eat, those kinds of things. And we crave different things. If we're exposed to a bunch of different things as a child, we're going to crave a variety as well. But that kind of bad rap cravings get is often because we only listen to our cravings when it's something nutrient dense or salty or really sugary, and that's when we're really listening and we're like, oh, I shouldn't eat that. But in reality, we also crave, on the opposite side, like fruits and vegetables, because if you've ever been on a road trip or if you've ever been on vacation and you're constantly eating out, or you're at a gas station for snacks all the time and you're eating like not the best foods, if we're going to put them in that category, after like a couple days you're like, I just really want a salad, or I just really want an apple. And so that just goes to show we all crave different things, and when we eat a bunch of sweet and salty things, we also crave veggies and fruits and good things for us. And if we ignore those cravings, what happens?
Binging.
Yep. Or those cravings intensify. So you're really wanting, everyone's having a slice of cake and you're really wanting a slice of cake, but you're like, no, it's a bad food, I shouldn't eat it. I'm a dietitian, like if they see me eating a slice of cake, they'll be like, you're a dietitian and you're eating a slice of cake. That's another topic in itself.
Yeah.
But, so you don't. But then when you get home, you still have that cake on your mind. And this is human nature. This happens to everybody. So then you go in your cupboard or your freezer and you eat a pint of ice cream. So it doesn't always happen like that. But that just shows, like, if you don't listen to your cravings, they'll intensify. They won't just go away. So we need to give ourselves permission to eat all foods whenever we feel like it. And in that way, and letting our patients and clients know that, in that way they can be freed from this like food police mentality. They can be freed from like food itself. A lot of times people feel like they're like consumed by nutrition or consumed by food, and it has a hold on them. In reality, like it shouldn't. Like we all have cravings. We can eat as we please, and know that our body will give us variety.
Okay, so if I were to tell you today that you could no longer eat ice cream starting tomorrow, would you eat it tonight? Who would eat ice cream tonight? I think I would. Exactly. So even thinking about restricting or actually restricting yourself, that can lead to having very intensified cravings, and also just our hunger and fullness cues can get way out of whack. So again, like Carly has been saying, giving yourself permission, unconditional permission to eat these foods on a regular basis. Maybe that means having some ice cream in the freezer, having some cookies in your cupboard. Just having those sweets around can really help, get rid of that black and white thinking, help you go into that gray thinking, and really satisfying your cravings when you do feel like you want something, and you don't feel like you have to eat the whole thing of ice cream. You can have a little bit because you have it so often that it's just a regular food again. Yeah, okay, so again, some days we feel like eating bacon, sometimes we feel like eating broccoli, and some days we feel like eating both, and all of these things are okay. So maybe have a little bit of bacon on top of your broccoli. Instead of having that black and white, oh, I'm just going to have broccoli, I'm not going to have bacon, maybe have both. Satisfy both cravings. Okay, so these are just some questions that you can ask yourself and your clients. So ask them, what foods do you feel out of control around? I can't keep pizza in my house, or I eat the whole thing, or ice cream, or Girl Scout cookies, things like that. Or what would happen if you gave yourself unconditional permission to eat as much as you wanted? Or what would happen if you also stayed mindful during the entire eating experience? So these are some things that we can just think about and ask our patients and our clients to really kind of understand their relationship with food. So often, in a clinical setting, these things aren't brought up, but they really can be in the right circumstance and with someone that's healthy. Okay, so how do we know if the food we are eating is satisfying the craving? It's all about mindfulness. So if we're not mindful when we're eating these foods that we deem might be bad, we can miss the whole experience, miss the whole craving, and then just kind of want it even more the next day. It's like it didn't even happen. So we really just need to stay mindful during every experience that we can. I know it's not always feasible, but really take into the consideration, how is this food making me feel today? And if it's not making you feel any better, then we'll talk about some ways to, go back. Okay, so kind of developing some coping mechanisms other than eating, that can be helpful. And we'll talk about that during emotional eating in a little bit.
So now we're going to talk about this mindful eating more. Have you guys ever done like a mindful eating thing? I did it once in my undergrad where we had like a little cutie orange and we were like, all right, now peel the orange. Now I don't know. It was like kind of weird, and I was just like, this is really weird. Like, I'm not going to do this every day. And so it's not that extreme. You don't need to sit there, close your eyes in every eating experience. That's just not realistic. That'd be, yeah. So anyways, but these are the things we want to try to do every time that we eat. Just be more aware. Savor the food. We really do want to enjoy the food that we're eating. eating, no matter what it is. If it's broccoli, if it's bacon, whatever it is, if they're mixed together, savor it. Observe how your body feels, how your stomach feels, how your mind feels. Be in the moment. So this is hard, and this is a problem in our society. We're always consumed by technology, and it can really get in the way of how we enjoy the eating experience. And a lot of times, if we're on our phones when we eat, or if we're watching TV, or if you're at the movies, all of a sudden, your box of cookie dough bites is gone. And you're like, what? I didn't even know I ate all. Like, that's crazy. It's because you weren't being mindful, or you weren't in the moment. But also being non-judgmental to yourself when you eat. This can be problematic if you're thinking in that black and white thinking, or if we all get those little voices in our head saying, like, why, just like really judgmental voices, like things you wouldn't say to a friend, but you say to yourself kind of thing. We really want to try to limit that. So, checking in with your body before you eat. All of these things, they seem like too good to be true, right? You're like, wait, I can have like 5 boxes of Girl Scout cookies in my house now? Sweet. But really, it's not that hard to just trust your cravings and listen to your body. But it is if you haven't done it in a while. So before you eat, check in with your body, and then during eating, is this satisfying my craving? If it's not, let it be, and know that it'll still be there in an hour if you want it, or, you know. And this is that thing that if you're not food insecure, this can be really helpful. If you are food insecure, or you have come from a food insecure background, it's not this easy, because you have learned that when food is there, you eat it, and that's not your problem, and that's society, and that's a whole another topic again. So if you are food insecure, have come from a food insecure background, this can be a lot more difficult. So noticing how your whole body responds to food. And this is a funny picture. Hopefully you don't feel like that when you eat food. If you do, maybe go see an allergist, or don't eat that food for a while. But anyways, if you feel uncomfortably full, or you have bowel regularity or irregularity, how you feel in terms of energy, heartburn, those kinds of things.
Okay. So now that Carly talked about mindful eating, we're going to talk a little bit about emotional eating. Okay, so we've all done this. Sometimes we eat for reasons other than why we're hungry, right? So why might we eat when we're not hungry? What are some emotions that we feel when we do this? Sadness. Stress. Yeah, stress is a big one. Anxiety, depression, things like that. So, emotional eating is one coping tool that we use. And if it didn't work, then, we wouldn't be doing it. So, in a way, everyone is going to eat emotionally, and we just have to kind of be okay with that. When we label emotional eating as something that's bad, we're probably going to want to do it even more. But the key here is to have those other coping mechanisms for our emotions. Maybe listen to a podcast, go for a walk with a friend, or meet up for coffee. Kind of just take eating out of the experience when we're feeling these emotions. But also being okay with the fact that emotional eating is normal, and it's okay at times. But we just have to take that guilt and that shame out of that equation. And again, being mindful. So notice how the food is making you feel. Eat slowly, savor that food, and just kind of think, maybe this food isn't really doing much for me right now. Maybe I need to learn how to cope with my emotions in a different way. Okay, so when someone eats to satisfy a craving, how do they usually eat? So when we are satisfying a craving, usually we're going to savor it a little bit more. Maybe not always the case, compared to how does someone eat when they're satisfying an emotion?
It's like fast.
Yeah, so they're probably going to eat a little bit faster. What else?
Probably overeat.
Yep, they might be overeating. They might just kind of not really be thinking too much. I just got to get this over with really quickly and just move on. So just noticing again, are you eating to satisfy a craving or are you eating to satisfy an emotion? Okay, so does all this stuff that we're talking about work? So there's actually been a good amount of research on health at every size and intuitive eating, and it's very promising. It is something that is newer, so there isn't as much out there, but it's continuing to grow, and the results are very promising. So this study, there's a few different ones, and we're going to give you the references at the end as well. But so people who give themselves full permission to eat have been shown to be less likely to eat in excess, less likely to binge eat, and also experience less guilt when eating. And also people that use more intuitive eating, they're more in response to their hunger and fullness. They've been shown to have more positive self-esteem and be more satisfied with their bodies. So I think that's pretty cool. And then again, intuitive eating has also been associated with higher HDL, so our good cholesterol, lower triglycerides in our blood, we have lower BMIs, and also lower cardiovascular risk. Okay, so now that we've talked about that first principle, so we've talked about more intuitive eating, listening to our hunger and fullness cues, our food cravings, being emotional, mindful with eating. So now we're going to talk about something called intuitive eating. Intuitive exercise. So finding our joy in movement. So Carly's going to talk a little bit about that. Sorry, it's kind of messed up.
And before I go into this doesn't, intuitive eating more falls within the dietitian's realm. Health at every size, I hope when I'm 70 and a dietitian that all public health professionals at least have heard of it. Because we hear all the time like doctors prescribing weight loss or tons of different things, tons of health professionals doing things that don't really align with health at every size. Like you literally can be healthy at every size, and research shows that. And we are still way behind in that thinking for all health professionals. So I hope when you guys become dietitians that you can kind of help other health professionals think this way too. Okay, so intuitive exercise. This one I think is, for me, the hardest. But there's like a lot of freedom on the other side of this. So what happens when weight loss is the primary motivation for exercise? We tend to count calories. We tend to exercise on machines that count calories burned. I'm so guilty of this. We exercise after we eat something high in calories. You hear this all the time. I hear this all the time. We avoid exercising in places where others might be more fit. And this is one of those things that it's just sad to me because gyms are filled with fit people, right? But where are the other people in the world? Because they don't feel comfortable there. And because society has told us that they shouldn't feel comfortable there. So that's just sad to me. And then the problem only gets worse from there if we have those kind of societal thinkings. And then we only continue to exercise if we continue to lose weight. And this is that health at every size. Exercising doesn't need to be for weight loss. It doesn't need to be for having your arms look skinnier. It doesn't need to be for any physical, like outwardly physical measure. It's for your mind. Oftentimes you feel really good, like in your mind you're just like more clear, or exercise does make your body feel good. And not because when you look in the mirror you're skinnier, but for other reasons too. So this is what intuitive exercise is kind of all about. We want to exercise because it feels good, and it's fun. We have variety. In college, which was not that long ago, I would go to the gym and I'd only go on the treadmill because, again, I could see how long I was doing it, how many calories were burned, that kind of thing. But I hated it. I hated it so much. So I haven't run in a really long time because I don't enjoy running, and that's totally fine. And that variety, I didn't have that variety. I was always going to the treadmill. And this is fine for some people. If the treadmill is like your heaven, it just wasn't mine. But it's really important, like we said with food, to put that into exercise as well. So listening to your body. Walking really feels good to me. It really clears my mind. I listen to podcasts when I walk. And this is, again, different for everyone. Maybe you hate walking, whatever. It's not like we have to say this exercise is good and this exercise is bad. Whatever you do and whatever feels good to you, and making it fit into your lifestyle. Time is a huge thing that people in like counseling, I hear like time is a huge thing for why they don't make meals ahead of time or whatever it may be in terms of food. But they can work out for an hour. So it's just interesting, and finding that balance and making things fit into your lifestyle. And this is, again, every patient you see, every client you see, exercise is going to look different for everybody. So making sure that you have an open mind when it comes to exercise is important. And so we have on the next slide some ideas. And these are great ideas, but like this wouldn't be appropriate, I don't think, to like give to a patient or a client, because first of all, you just want to ask them, what do you enjoy? Without giving them a list of what maybe they should enjoy, because that might like skew their decisions or skew their thoughts around exercise. So a lot of people think like walking, oh, that's not exercise. Unless I'm like visibly sweating, I'm not exercising, which that's not true. Dancing, all these different things, like they're all exercise. Taking the stairs. Oftentimes we think like if we're not doing something where it like hurts or it's like really hard, it's not gonna work. And that's oftentimes why people will just take the elevator instead of the stairs, because they're like, it's just like a couple steps, like it doesn't even matter. But when you add those things up, they all count for exercise. You don't need to go to the gym if you don't enjoy the gym. I don't enjoy the gym. But anyways, yeah.
Yes, and then maybe just thinking about instead of calling it exercise, calling it just daily movement. So all the forms of movement that you do can be added up together. Because I think exercise kind of has a negative connotation too. Okay. So this is just kind of in summary what we talked about today. So we kind of talked about the importance of listening to our hunger and fullness to determine how much to eat, when to eat, things like that. Carly touched on mindful eating and the importance of that. We talked about satisfying our cravings, why it's okay to have cravings, why it's normal for us to have them. We talked about the importance of planning for our meals and having a variety of foods available to us. And then Carly talked about intuitive movement and exercise. And so we can kind of both, conclude this, but we really thank you guys for listening to us today.
If you're interested in this more, this is kind of a starter book to get.
Oh, yes.
And actually this is Taylor's, but I've been reading it. And there's 2 registered dietitians, and if you hear about this in the future, a lot of people are just going to like refer you to this book. There's also a workbook that I've seen floating around, and I think I'm going to get that soon. So it's a huge topic. If you just read, literally I've only read this much, but if you just read the first like couple chapters, I encourage you to read it all. I haven't read it all yet, but it's like mind-blowing to me, and the fact that I never heard it in my undergrad. So we are so like happy to be able to like expose you to this, even if it is just once, but I really hope it's not just once. I hope you take it into your future in dietetics.
And there's also a book called Health at Every Size that I just got, and it goes more into this, and it's by Linda Bacon. She's an awesome Health at Every Size advocate, so I would definitely encourage you to read that as well. And
Do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
What if you're having cravings, but you're, like, not hungry? Like, sometimes I'll go to the cafe, eat a giant meal, I'm, like, really full, but then I come back and I'm like, I really feel like chocolate or something.
Yeah, I get those cravings too. Like, I'll have a meal, like a dinner meal, but some people, they also need that sweet side.
Mm-hmm.
So, like we said, listen to those
honoring
cravings.
those.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And don't feel bad about it, because that's, like, the most harmful thing, is when you eat something and you're like, oh, I shouldn't be eating this. That's actually not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to be okay with it, so.
maybe your meal wasn't as satisfying as you wanted it to be, so you're craving that, maybe that extra fat and sugar, which is normal.
Yep.
You need that.
I have a question kind of going along with cravings. So if you, you're supposed to honor your cravings, but what if you're also, out of control, I guess, in a way, where it's just okay, if you open, like they said, or in the PowerPoint it was I can't get pizza because I'll eat the whole thing, or opening a bag of chips, it's you can't have just one, so.
And this might happen when you first start to be an intuitive eater.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important part when you start to be an intuitive eater is to not feel guilty about it. Mm-hmm. So if you feel like you can't be in control around chips, eat the chips however much you want and don't feel bad about it. After a while, you'll realize that the chips don't have control over you, and you can eat them freely whenever you want. So at the beginning, you might eat a whole bag of chips. At the beginning, you might eat whatever it may be. You might eat a lot of it. But as long as you feel okay with it, eventually that food will not have control over you, and you'll be completely fine in its presence.
Yes.
I've heard something about flexible dieting. Is that different from
Have you heard that?
I haven't heard of flexible dieting. It might be, they might call it that instead of intuitive eating though.
I just know some people from my hometown that are really big into fitness, and they'll do the fitness competitions and stuff, and they they still count their calories and stuff, but
So that's not going to be intuitive
okay.
eating.
It still seems like a really good idea though, because they do have ice cream or
So a lot of diets, I'm being very vulnerable, but when I was 20 years old, I just came into college, and my mom saw that I had gained some weight, because this happens when it might happen to you, it might not, but it happened to me, so my mom put me on Weight Watchers. Weight Watchers seemed awesome, because you could eat ice cream, you could eat, all different foods, but you had to restrict. You couldn't eat however much felt good. You couldn't eat however much would satisfy you. You had to fit it into your macros, or you had to fit it into your points. Whenever you have to fit foods into something else, it's just not sustainable. It's not going to work for your whole life. But that's a really good point you're bringing up, they can eat ice cream. You can eat ice cream too. Anyone can eat ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a time in which, how do you know, when to, help people go towards this and when to not? Maybe some people would use this as an excuse to just eat with, I know we're, encouraging to eat whatever you want, whenever you want, but it could be taken to, an extreme kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, there's time and places to use intuitive eating. And I think as we become in, you know, the next 10 to 20 years, I think we'll be seeing this more used. It is a pretty new topic right now, but, you know, the focus of intuitive eating is to give that unconditional permission to eat. And even though it seems really wild for us,
Like
like it's
scary maybe,
Yes.
like, oh my god, I'm going to eat so much and take it to that level.
yeah. But in reality, like, that person's gonna learn, like, what's best for them. They're gonna be more in tune with their hunger and fullness, and they're gonna be like, oh, I can have a little bit of chips, like, that's fine, but I'm also gonna have some vegetables with it, because that's what makes my body feel really good. So at first, it is a really vulnerable time for people, and kind of uncomfortable. Like, they're probably not gonna feel good if they eat an entire pint of ice cream, but however, you know, they'll learn over time, and it's not the end of the world.
And it's really interesting. It's a good point you bring up. And we're not experts in this. And I hope to be one day more of an expert in this because I see so much, like, promise. But people, like you said, they might take it to an extreme. And it's not like, there's a couple, like, rules in intuitive eating, but this should not be meant to, like, this is a diet, this is what I have to follow. It's giving yourself permission to just let go, and eventually you'll figure it out. And a big thing about health at every size that I feel like we kind of forgot to mention is that BMI is such it's not a great indicator of health. And so when you do start intuitive eating, you might gain weight. That's scary for a lot of people, especially if you have, I've never worked, well, I've kind of, some people with eating disorders, but especially people with eating disorders, gaining weight, like, that's not okay. So I don't know how you would approach it with eating disorders, and but this does happen. They do approach eating disorders in this way after that kind of first recovery process.
Yeah, just because someone with an eating disorder, their hunger and fullness is not present. So intuitive eating at first is definitely not advised for someone, because if they're never hungry, we told them, you know, eat when you're hungry. They would never eat. So again, time and place for this. But eventually, when down the road, when they're in recovery, we can start incorporating these principles into their diet.
And weight loss, we touched on this a little bit, is really hard. That's just another topic. And I don't know what's right or wrong. I don't know if weight loss needs to be something that is, like, prescribed, because I don't know if that's mentally, like, healthy for a lot of people. So there's just a lot of things to think about with intuitive eating and weight loss, and having someone that's overweight be okay with being overweight and not feeling like, well, I need to get to a BMI of 25 because I'm going to get, like, all these different diseases if I don't.
And we can send you, there's, like, the first presentation, because these were developed by other people, that goes into BMI and, like, the implications of it, and a little bit more about how Haes started. So we can always send that to you guys if you're more interested in learning more about that kind of stuff. And there's another one, too, that I haven't even looked at. There's a third one. So we can always send it to Maria, and she can send it to you guys, put it on Moodle or however. Yeah. What other questions do you guys have?
So with intuitive eating, I guess this isn't something like that someone that, like, is at a BMI where they're, like, in danger of like cardiovascular issues and stuff like that. Like, you shouldn't suggest.
So they might have an eating disorder.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the eating disorders look so different. You can be 600 pounds and have an eating disorder.
Right.
You can be way
Like
underweight.
disordered thoughts with food and exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No. So then you're saying, like, this might help them then, or in a way.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if someone's severely ill,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not.
Yes.
But, you know, once they're at a place where
Mm-hmm.
they're a little bit healthier, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you have to take it case by case. But eventually, like, everyone should be an intuitive eater. Like,
Right.
eventually, at some point in their life. Like, that's what we're naturally born to be. We were born intuitive eaters. But it's society and the diets and everything that have reinforced these good food, bad food mentality in us. So, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of not to do with intuitive eating, but I know, like, you said that you got your master's degree. Do you suggest that for us?
Yeah, well, so I did a program where it was like, it was only a 1-year program, and I got free tuition, like, I'm just going to put that out there, because I worked. So financially, it was really feasible for me. I also love Virginia Tech. I worked well with my advisor. I did like some undergrad research with her, so I was already like working with her basically, and a lot of my friends were doing the program, so it just kind of made sense. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with dietetics at that point, so it's just kind of like the right time for me to do that. You know, it is a lot of work, you know, a lot of reading and writing, and it's not easy, but if you find, you know, find that you want to do that, then I would say go for it. But it's not
If
always...
you crave a master's,
Like, is it beneficial? Like,
you know, it depends on the job that you have. You might be more, I don't know.
okay.
It depends on the case. A lot of times you don't need your master's, but eventually everyone is required to have their master's, so it will be a little bit more competitive. But you'll already be practicing.
will you? Yeah, you will be.
Yeah, we
Okay.
will be.
Yeah. So it's iffy, but yeah, if you find something that really interests you, like research-wise, like there's usually like funding available too. You just have to like.
I think that's the most important part with the master's, like,
Yeah.
making sure, like, not making sure you know what you want to do in the future, but, like, doing something not just to get a master's. Like, if you're just doing it to get a master's, I wouldn't advise it.
Yeah.
Do it if you really want to learn something more. Because you guys had the option, so it's, like, important to do that.
Yeah.
Because there's research in so many different things. Like, you could do research in intuitive eating. Maybe
You
like,
should.
Find
I'll read
an
it.
advisor that, you know, is passionate about what you are passionate about. Because, you know, if you're not passionate about what you're researching, like, those 1 to 2 years are not going to be fun for you.
So what was yours?
So mine was, like, more food policy based with brand mascots. So it was looking at basically food, beverage, and restaurant companies' brand mascots and how they affect the diets of children and their parents. So I did like something called a Q methodology study, where some of you guys participate in a research study with the card sort?
My friend did.
Okay, yeah. So we use the same thing. That was like our research group for our internship, but I really like the idea of Q methodology. So you have images or statements where you sort them on this board, and you put it into this database, and it gives you viewpoints of a population. And you don't really need that many people. I think it's kind of interesting. Right now, like, my interest is not food policy. It's more about this kind of stuff. But, you know, back when I was in school, it was. So, you know, your interests change, and that's okay. And I learned a lot, so there's nothing that I regret about it.
Any other questions? Alrighty, well, thanks for listening to us.
Thank you guys. The acknowledgements.
Bye, Cece. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.